I hereby call this, ooh, that's loud. I hereby call to order the March 9th meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee. My name is Linda Lakofsky. The meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'm going to read the vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment. I guess it's not going to be a good night. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Next is chairperson's remarks. Hopefully, we're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel as the state and now cities and towns start relaxing restrictions for COVID. Over the past 2 years, through challenging circumstances, I've seen amazing work happening in our schools, demonstrating how it really does take a village. I want to take a moment to thank our village, which includes our nurses, custodians, cafeteria staff, bus drivers, IT experts, main office staff, administration, therapists, counselors, teachers, and IAs, who have all worked incredibly hard during this pandemic. Their focus never wavered on providing a safe, secure, and supportive learning environment for our students. I want to especially thank Kyle Warren, our business administrator, for the many hats he has worn throughout the pandemic, from explaining how many air changes per hour were needed in our buildings and on school buses, to navigating with our bus company the ever-changing bus routes, to finally the tremendous amount of work and time Kyle has put into the budget we're going to vote later tonight. On behalf of the school committee, I thank you and our entire village for all you've done and continue to do for our students. The next is oral communications from the public. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee? Okay. The next item on the agenda is Student of the Month, and I'm going to hand that to Erin. If you
Thank you, Linda. Student of the Month is one of our most favorite items on the agenda, and it's my pleasure this month to actually introduce the program and the individual. The Student of the Month was established in 2019 by the school committee to honor exemplary students. Nominations are collected throughout the year from staff members at all 5 schools. Nominations are made through 5 categories: service to fellow students, teachers, or the community, dedication, determination, and persistence in the face of obstacles, attitude towards learning and determination, high achievement in academics, athletics, or performing arts, and significant improvement in academics, athletics, or performing arts. Selections are made by the chair of the school committee, the superintendent, and 1 member of the policy and advocacy subcommittee. I'm pleased to introduce Jillian Pinto, who nominated our March 2022 Student of the Month, Tyler Lafayette. Ms. Pinto, can you please come up and tell us about Tyler's accomplishments?
Just making sure. So this is Tyler. On a regular basis, in fact, even today, he always gives our class examples of what it means to just be a head-to-toe exemplary student all around. He does everything from offering help to his classmates, including asking group members to work with him that don't have partners, comforting his classmates that he notices might be having a hard time with something as small as a math problem, to getting hurt in phys ed, bringing them down to the nurse, rubbing their back, saying, it's okay. Today, one student needed help cleaning their desk, and I said, is there anybody who, I didn't even finish the sentence, and Tyler's hand was up in the air, and he was already starting to get up to go over to help her. So just always showing students what it means to be empathetic, to be a community member, a team player, and he really holds their behavior at a higher level, because from seeing him do what he does, they are now given that example, and they tend to do those things more often, seeing what Tyler does. And so my first student ever being nominated, getting this award, is such an incredible honor for him, and I'm so excited because he deserves all of this. He deserves every second of it, because I think sometimes those things tend to fly under the radar. So this is such a great thing that you've established, because kids like Tyler deserve this all the time. So thank you for the opportunity to let him have this. Yep.
I would like to present something to Tyler, if he could come up.
The official photographer.
No, you get in it. You're the chair. It's a school committee thing.
Animal print, yeah. Yeah, that was the other thing. That was really what did it. Look at that. What do you say?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you guys so much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Oh. I'm going to read aloud the donations. A monetary donation in the amount of $500 was made by Arthur S. Page Insurance to help with costs for the DECA overnight field trip to Boston in March. A monetary donation in the amount of $1,000 was made by BRM Realty LLC in Gloucester to help with costs for the DECA overnight field trip to Boston in March. We have 3 planned field trips for our students that we will be approving. First is a trip, Triton Community Service Club to Landscape and Legacy in the Southwest, a service trip over February vacation 2023 to help the Navajo Nation. The second is the trip to the Triton French Exchange Program to Paris and Loire Valley, France from April 15th to the 29th in 2023. French exchange students will visit America the week of October 14th through the 28th on 2022. This particular program Maureen, myself, and Paul had our students the same exact year that went for the French exchange program. It's a wonderful program for our students. The third trip is a Triton High School to Costa Rica, a unique Spanish language immersion experience with the 11th and 12th graders in July of 2023. The final dates will be determined. Can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Can I just make one comment? I just want to make a quick comment. I'm just really happy to see these trips back on the agenda for approval, because it's just, I feel like we're finally getting back to normal. So, since we had to cancel trips 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
So, it's great. Thank you.
And if I can just add one clarification, the dates for the French exchange may shift. I believe that's the week of vacation and the week after. They might be shifting it to the week before vacation and the week of, because it has to do with the French student, their academic calendar, and they want to make sure they're a week of vacation and a week in school. So that might shift, but that'll all be on the final approval next year once the details are
Well,
ironed out.
hopefully these trips can still stay in place with everything that's going on in Europe.
So, Linda, I have a question.
Certainly,
So, Brian, have we gone to Costa Rica before?
I believe we have.
Yes, I would have to go back and get the detail, and that's not an exchange program. That's more of an experience, a cultural experience. So both of the trips is a service club, and then another trip that are both outside groups that are not part of an exchange program. So there's been a travel club that's been varying degrees of active over the years, but I do believe a group has gone to Costa Rica in the past, yes. It's been a while.
All those in favor? The student representative, Kaylee, was unable to make it, and she sends her apologies. New business, would any members like to raise items for inclusion on future items? DEI research, update from members. Does anybody else have anything that they've read or would like to share? Okay, the monthly CPAC update, Caitlin will give an update.
So the CPAC has interim board elections. So if you'd like to look into their board positions or get descriptions and see who's involved, that's on their Facebook page. And they're also actively seeking middle school, high school, and elementary school liaisons, specifically at PGS for the elementary schools. They have an apparel fundraiser going on that's also on their Facebook page, and 15% goes to their different events and speakers and whatnot going throughout the district. And they just ask that people can attend their next meeting on March 29th at 6 p.m. And they will have a presentation of the Federation of Children with Special Needs on basic rights evaluation and eligibility. It is virtual, but registration is required. So if you want to head over to their Facebook page and see what's going on.
Thank you, Caitlin. The next is the District Communication Committee, and Narissa will give an update.
So I'll keep this one short. So the District Communications Committee by way of background, is made up of representatives of the town select boards, finance committees, town managers, administrators, school committee, and district administration. Last met at Triton on February 17th. The minutes are included in the packet. A lot of this was just general updates on the undertakings of that group and the two working groups, landlord, tenant, and alternative assessment working groups. No major updates there. It was a lot of kind of recap.
Thank you. The next item is the Superintendent's Report. Brian will provide this.
Certainly. So by way of an update on, seems like it's the first update I give every month as a COVID update. So when we went into the break, we knew we were coming back without masks. Obviously, the big concern was, would we see a spike in cases after the break? I'm pleased to report that the first day back, we had a handful of cases that were from over the break and the weekend. Then we didn't have any cases reported all of last week until we have had a handful of cases reported this week. So certainly it has calmed down, and that is good news. So we are continuing to move forward. We're, as far as end of year plans, we're planning. I think everything we're doing to the point you were saying, Maureen, about nice to see things on the agenda. planning as if things are going to proceed on the current path, but also knowing that things can take a turn very quickly. So we all know that we might need to pivot and turn. Hopefully we won't, but everything we're planning with that in mind. So as far as students coming back and having the option to mask informally, principals report in the buildings, they would guess 15 to 20% of staff and students are wearing masks, and so far it has seemed relatively non-eventful. It's so normal to see masks that it seems to be what we've heard and relatively just a non-issue whatsoever. So I'm very pleased to hear that. Obviously, that was a concern that folks who would choose to wear a mask, that we want to respect that choice. And everything I've heard so far points to that working out fairly well. So thankful for that, thankful for everyone for their approach and response to that. So as far as other updates, we're just going to take the calm for a little while. There's nothing else. I don't think there's anything else as far as updates to report to you as far as those updates. As far as the next item I had written about was the ELA curriculum adoption. That was something we had presented to you a while back. I don't remember exactly when that was presented. That was Kim Croto that alerted you to the fact that we were going through a curriculum adoption process. We are scheduled to report to you for an approval. Sorry, I'm very loud tonight. On May 18th is our May meeting. There's been a committee working, currently piloting Wit and Wisdom and Amplify, 2 curricula, and that will be K through 6. So Anna Bates to my right here, certainly if you want to add anything, Anna, but that pilot has been ongoing, full committee. Wit and Wisdom was piloted first, and now Amplify is being piloted, so that group is meeting fairly regularly from across all 3 schools, and will be bringing a presentation and a recommendation, I should say, in May for you to approve, and that would be a formal adoption, and that would be ready to be implemented in September. So any questions? We should pause there and see if there are any questions on that. Again, not a lot of details tonight, but we will be coming back in May for anything I should add. You want to add? No? That's it. Got to get you talking here. Okay. Moving on, again, NEASC report. You know that the NEASC decennial visit, which is a once every 10-year visit, occurred in December of 21. It was a great visit, 3 days. That report has been drafted. Took a little while, took a little longer than we had hoped to have that report. We have a draft report that Patrick and I reviewed that then goes back to the visiting committee. We can't obviously substantively change anything, kind of like the audit report. Make sure it's clear and how it's written, and if there are recommendations, there are recommendations. We don't get to change those. So we hopefully have that back fairly quickly, and if that's the case, we would target the next meeting on April 14th to have Patrick and a committee come to present that report to you to receive and file and give a kind of a more global update on that whole process and what's next in those steps. Depending on how quickly we get that back, if that can't be back in time, then we would put that also on the May agenda. My goal is that I want to put it on the agenda and so that you have enough time well ahead, not the Friday before, but if it's going to be the April 14th meeting, I'd love to get that to you by April 1st so that you have some time to digest that. It's not a thesis, but it's pretty meaty, and it's not a long, extensive, it's spit out of a system, if you will. So it's not necessarily the most flowing document, but there's a lot of meat in there. So I'm going to give you enough time to process that before we have them come and present. Also, just a quick update. I had reported to you a while back, TEF, Triton Education Foundation, has new leadership. It's a primarily elementary and middle school parents now. There have been a lot of folks with TEF, involved with TEF over the years. They have, as their kids have grown older and graduated, so have they. So it's great that we have some fresh blood, and they're working on it goes back and forth between environmental and sustainability pathway. And the hope is that this starts at the high school and then filters backwards, and that's something that we would actually start to get kids roped into in the middle school and maybe even upper elementary. So TEF received, you've heard of the North Newburyport Area Industrial NAID. So that foundation is it that foundation or another? It's not NAID. There's another foundation that was through, a charitable foundation through Institution for Savings, and it's dissolving. And so to disperse the funds, they just wrote checks to all their previous donors. So they wrote a check to TEF for $150,000. And at this point, TEF is deciding how to use that, but they have said this is great seed money to launch this program. So a lot of balls in the air, a lot of things happening, but the science teachers at the high school, Tom Horsley and a couple others have been involved with that. Anna's been, and so we're still working through that, and again, hope to branch that down into the middle school. But in conjunction, partnering that with the internship program that is happening, and this would be both coursework and internship. So it would be a really amazing opportunity. I think if we do it well, something very unique that we would be offering, and this would be something we've talked about it as some kind of, don't know what the right term is, but a credentialing on a diploma, so that we could say, if there's a corporate sponsor or what have you, that they've passed this kind of rigorous standard and done this coursework and life experience. So hopeful that that's something that we'd be ready to have a lot more detail by the fall, but that is still, with all the other balls in the air, it is still moving forward, and I'm excited about that. And then final update, the COVID case reporting. I think it might be time. I know the current dashboard still has single cases and notes, test and stay in quarantine. So again, one more time, let's change the dashboard. So I don't wave my magic wand. Paul and Narissa wave their magic wands, but that's something we've been talking about, so we'll have to take a look at how best to adapt the dashboard for that update. Two other quick things. I just want to report that I was not there, but there was a future freshman night for 8th grade parents last night, right where we sit. I've heard unbelievable reports. They actually had program coordinators and brought students with them, so it was a combination of the program coordinator with the student account of the amazing opportunities. So you're nodding as you were there.
So the students were really funny last night, and some of them realized it, and some of them didn't realize how funny they were. So it was a great experience to be in here and to listen to how they enjoyed the programming that's here, and made some recommendations for parents that weren't really sure which electives to be able to send their children to give them some ideas. And then they had an opportunity for everybody to come up afterwards and talk and ask more questions. So it was great.
Excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. And that's when I heard it was a Triton Pride night. Like, everyone that was there said, wow, this feels like a great place to be, and excitement around 8th graders becoming freshmen. So kudos to everyone involved in that. And last thing, just a quick update. We haven't talked about, spent so much time talking about other crises that we haven't talked about all the crises we were talking about before the pandemic. So you remember we had adopted Alice, which is an active shooter response. We were ready to hold a big drill the spring of 20. Been having a lot of conversations with the police chiefs, and I think that they've learned a lot over the past couple of years. And I think as we look to get back on track with that, just reassessing whether Alice is the right protocol. There are other options out there that I think are more kind of global response. And so working on that, so I'm hopeful that we'll have a date on the books to get together and make some decisions, so that when we're rolling this back out, it's consistent pre-K through 12, regardless of where you are. I've had a lot of great discussions with police chiefs about cross-training and this campus, and even though it's in Byfield, right, when things happen, everyone's responding and knowing the building and stuff. So just to note that that's in process.
Thank you, Brian. Can we have a motion to receive and file the March 2022 Superintendent's Report as presented?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is the long-term financial planning, and Narissa will give an update.
I think it's budget approval next. So I was like, I don't think it's me yet.
I jumped.
mean,
Okay. FY23 budget, and the superintendent and school business administrator will go through it. Jim's not here.
Did you pass the mic to me?
I did.
Okay, I'll pass it to Kyle.
Thank you kindly. So attached to the agenda for this evening is the full FY23 final budget document. So follow up to the tentative budget that we reviewed at the last meeting. Looking at that document compared to the one you have in front of you is substantially all the same information, but we layered on top of that a 10-page narrative just to add some more context and detail. That narrative starts off by discussing the unique year that we're having in terms of the FY23 budget. A unique opportunity where we have some substantial savings in healthcare costs and personnel costs. Quick reminder on the personnel costs there, because of turnover and attrition, there's been substantial savings in the salary line items, and then healthcare with our renewal with Maya, as well as some changes in enrollment. Those savings have given us the opportunity to propose a substantial amount of new programming. Each of those items that were proposed are discussed in detail across the 10 pages. And then we get on page 11 to the summary of the changes from last year's budget, so from FY22 to FY23. Again, this is substantially the same as the tentative budget that we reviewed at the last meeting, with one change. Because we now have, I think we can say finalized, just about finalized, yeah, our healthcare renewal. We were comfortable with carving out some additional savings there in the retiree insurance line item. So on page 12, the bottom number there, total operating increase of $1,483,575. That's $68,000 lower than the tentative budget because of those savings in retiree healthcare. I won't go through each of those line items because we have discussed them in detail, but that $1.4 million increase is a 3.24% increase over FY22. On page 13, quick update on another change we have here from the tentative budget. Walking through the page at the top, we detailed the total operating capital expenses. That agrees with the previous page there, the changes. If you go towards the bottom, about 2/3 of the way down, under the capital debt budget, because our excess and deficiency, E&D, was just certified at $769,000, there's a part of the stadium debt funding plan where it stipulates that if our E&D is in excess of $500,000 annually, we have to utilize $90,000 of that to offset that capital assessment to the communities. So since the tentative budget, we've included that line item there to decrease the assessment by $90,000. All the way at the bottom, all the way at the bottom of page 13, it details the total assessment to the communities. And you can see that that's a 3.52% increase overall from the prior year. That disparity between the change in the total assessment and the change in the total budget is because of the continued challenge with state funding, where the portion of this that the state covers of our annual operating expenses has not consistently met up with increases in our budget. The rest of the document offers the same detail as the tentative, with each school location, footnotes at the bottom of each school location to discuss the changes there of note. And I'll leave it there. Any questions?
Can I just ask you to confirm, so our certified E&D was?
$769,000.
Okay. So just to remember, that was an agreement we made when getting the stadium approved, when it was private funding and then the town said, let's do it. We agreed to use any amount above 500,000 capped at 90. So if we certified 523,000, we would use 23,000. If it's above 590, we use 90. We never use more than 90. So I think as we now have a very different angle, right? We're talking about long-term financial planning, capital planning. That's probably something that we need to address. But by the same token, it's a commitment that we made in establishing the stadium, so that's why that's there, just to make sure that context.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions?
Ready for a motion?
Yes, I'd like to.
I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2023 final budget of $47,480,468, including both operating and capital debt costs, with a total operating expenditure of $47,215,874 and capital expenditure of $264,594, resulting in combined assessments to the town of Newbury of $10,830,672, the town of Rowley of $11,670,054, and the town of Salisbury of $14,832,211, with the remaining balance of $10,147,531 being funded by other state and local revenues.
Can we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, now, Narissa, the long-term financial planning.
You just want to keep pushing me there, don't you? All right. So for the last couple of years, the school committee has been talking about how to improve our financial stability of the district, and in particular, our bond rating. Later tonight, we're going to look at the statement of interest for the Byfield campus. Over the past months, we formed a plan. We presented that to the district communication committee, so town select boards, town managers and administrators. The school full committee's been through it. As a follow-up to that plan, Kyle and our treasurer, Kevin Mahoney, worked on a draft of a financial reserve policy. Finance subcommittee looked at 2 drafts of that. The school committee voted a draft of that as a first reading in February. Kyle is now going to walk us through any changes, and then hopefully we will have a second and final reading.
To confirm, there have been no changes since the last reading, but I'd be happy to go into any level of detail there if anybody'd like.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the financial reserve policy as presented as a second and final vote.
Can we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, the next item on the agenda is establishing a stabilization account. As noted in the policy that was just approved, one of the first steps is establishing a stabilization account. This requires a vote of the school committee in order to begin this account. After this, it will be submitted to the towns for warrant articles in the upcoming town meetings. Can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to establish a stabilization fund pursuant to Section 16G.5 of Chapter 71 of the Massachusetts General Laws, said stabilization fund to be invested and to retain its own interest earnings as provided by law, and further set up an operational line item to be created to transfer available monies into said stabilization fund.
Can I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All those in, no, any discussion? All those in favor?
Can I actually take us back to the policy? So, I just wanted to take some more time. So you see, for those of you following along on board docs, we put a note, and I forgot to do it. So there is an existing policy, as we went through, there is existing policy DIB. Again, totally missed it all throughout this whole process as we've been talking about this since September. Policy DIB really just talks about E&D and sets quite a different target than what we spent a lot of time with Finance Subcommittee, crafting the words around what we want to target for E&D. So in our mind, this is the new policy DIB. So it doesn't need a different vote, but just to make sure everyone agrees that this is now policy DIB, and the language you just approved as a second reading replaces DIB in board docs in the policy section. Everyone seems to be nodding.
Does anybody have any questions on that?
Thank you so much.
The next item is the Wydia Regional High School vacancies. The Wydia School Committee is comprised of a member from each town that is selected by their local school committee. Our school committee selects the members from Newbury, Raleigh, and Salisbury. I recently received letters from Wydia noting that the Raleigh seat currently occupied by David Irving and the Salisbury seat currently occupied by Ron Fitzgerald will require new appointments at the end of March. Over the last couple of months, we have solicited letters of interest for these positions. Only David and Ron submitted letters, and those are included in your packet. Could we have I did invite them to come here this evening if they wanted to say anything, but Whittier has a school committee meeting this evening. So they both declined. So can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint Ron Fitzgerald to the Salisbury seat and David Irving to the Rowley seat on the Whittier School Committee for the 2022 to 2025 terms.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Next item is the 22-23 school year calendar. The superintendent is going to review the school calendar proposed for next year.
Okay, so there's been so much discussion about this calendar. The calendar you have before you is the calendar that we talked about in February, and then what I heard in February, and has been a lot of discussion since, was support the changes that we had proposed, namely getting rid of the 90-day early releases on the Mondays. I have still yet to find someone who believes that was the way to go. So we're back to the half days, 8 PD half days across the school year. That was the major shift. A lot of discussion about, when we, at the table, about the winter break and the fact that we had a half day showing on the 23rd. And there was a lot of discussion about here and elsewhere about travel and that being so close that it'd be great to put an extra day there, so the 23rd's off and the 22nd is the half day. And then there was discussion here, there, and everywhere about a mental health day. It's something that doesn't exist. It's not a holiday. I like the fact that it appears in our calendar all capitalized like we're making it a holiday. So that's in the calendar. And we, again, trying to balance, everyone knows here we are in the month of March, the longest, the longest month for a teacher. It's the only month without any break at all. So stuck it there on the 20th, kind of breaks up the month. The February break is again late in the month, and then we have the April break. So that's the way it's proposed. What that does is it leaves us with a final 180th day on June 15th and a 185th day on June 23rd. That's the exact same as we have this year. So this year we've had 2 snow days, so we're getting out on the 17th. So if this year happened next year, it actually means we're going to the 20th because we would be closed on the 19th for Juneteenth holiday. The change here is because we're putting 2 additional days that aren't typically in the calendar, the only way we can achieve, I should say, the 15th and the 23rd as the 180th and 185th day is to start before Labor Day. The other change that we've noted is October 7th is a PD day. So historically, when you go way long ago, it varied. And there was 1 PD day up front, and then we had 2 additional PD days within the school year. More recently, we've done all 3 PD days up front and then started after Labor Day. This actually starts school before Labor Day and pushes one of the PD days out to October 7th. So I had Maureen do a little research for me. So the last time we have not started before Labor Day since 2007. We were able to find calendars as far back as 2007. The only year since 2007 that we started before Labor Day was the 2011 year. So this is breaking tradition. It goes back and forth, right? I mean, I was texting all day with Sue Densmore, who was polling, trying to get teachers to rank order, and 50-50. Every single question asked is 50-50. So you either believe in getting a couple days in before Labor Day, or you're a staunch believer in school should not happen before Labor Day. So the way we have it presented here, it allows us to add those additional days. There are those who would say, no, take the day out in March, take the day out in December, keep the 15th and the 23rd, and let's start on what would be September 6th, the day after Labor Day. A lot of people, we formally shared this through the PD committees, the district PD committee and principals with their school-based committees, and loved this. So that's where we're at. Thoughts? I'm proposing it as it is here on the table because, right, half of everyone's going to be mad. So, not mad. I will say that. People no one's mad about it. People have pretty strong opinions on when summer begins and ends.
I love it.
I'm shocked. I'm surprised that you actually found evidence that we did have a school day before Labor Day ever in existence.
So, I mean, again, went back to 2007, and
Right,
obviously we existed before
I didn't think it ever
that.
happened. I've told my kids forever that I've never known Triton to ever start school ever before Labor Day. Not that I'm saying that we shouldn't, but I'm just surprised.
Yeah, it's obviously recently never, and I remember as a teacher, even as principal, like when I go back that far, I remember it depended on where Labor Day fell. If Labor Day was late, we started before. If Labor Day was early, we started after. Since then, we've had late and early Labor Days and have just always pushed to after. So I should say too, right, there's other options here. Have the first day of school on, make sure I'm looking at the right month, on the 1st instead of the 31st. Keep the March day, get rid of the December day, and we're still landing on the same day. Do that. Keep the December day, lose the March day, and still land on the same days. So there's other ways to move it around.
I'd say just from a school year flow, educational value to the days, I mean, there are obviously days that are always more use than others. I think they have much more use starting before Labor Day and having those other 2 days, the 22nd and March 20th, off. I think this works to me.
So I believe we planned to start before Labor Day last year because I remember asking a bunch of people and saying, like, what do you think of this when I was trying to get feedback literally like I don't even know where I was, but like, hey, what does everybody think of this? And it was roughly a 50-50 split, but I think people were very willing to say, this is kind of the start of the new year. If we had already had plans and my kids were a couple days late, like it's not a huge deal. So I have no problem with that start. 2 questions. One is, and I want to say I love the intro to Christmas vacation, to holiday break, because I think that's a good one.
So can I just confirm? So yes, we were scheduled to start before Labor Day.
Okay.
And then deferred out to the 16th. So
I was going to say, like,
we started September 16th. That's the only day in the history of Triton anyone started that late. So yes, we were scheduled. As Maureen was looking up, she's like, oh, I had it listed. Yeah. So we were, and then we adjusted it by 10 days.
Okay, gotcha. I remember having that conversation. The choice of the 7th for the full day PD day, can you talk about why that day was chosen, please?
As opposed to?
Any other day on the calendar.
Any? So did you want to share an opinion about that? Or
No,
just
we heard over and over again from Kim and from you that when there was a PD day or a PD half day coming into especially a long weekend, like the staff attendance at the PD day just wasn't great. So I'm just wondering why of all the days on the calendar, you chose to buddy that with a Monday holiday.
You want to talk about that?
Not really.
I tried to give a chance to talk earlier.
No, so I don't know that we chose, I don't know where that particular day, that time of year, though, I think was first discussed at a district PD committee meeting, and some of the teachers were saying, like, it's sort of like they've gotten into the routines, they've gotten to know the students, we may have new curriculum, new resources, like that's a good time to kind of dive back into it. But as far as the actual date, I'll go to Brian for that.
She is fully comfortable in the position. I just want to say that. So, yeah, so, I mean, we've talked around, as you said, we've talked around this for years. Families always want it butted up against a holiday to make a weekend out of it, right? If you're gonna have to have a day off and figure it off, they have to figure out a holiday if they work on a holiday. It is not ideal to have either half-days or PD days on a Monday or Friday. It can be, yeah, either. Friday, yes, people tend to be more tired, more worn out. But if it works, when you balance everything, put it all on the table, and all the possible players, the students, the teachers, the parents, everyone involved, we felt like this made sense to give it a shot. Everyone, this is what most districts are doing, right? This is kind of the norm. We talked about the election day, right? So, and that's one that a lot of districts have, which is November 7th, November 8th this year. A lot of other districts have it off because they use schools for polling. We don't. Again, it's not PD that's available for the majority of teachers, but there are a lot of kind of one-off specialty art, music, PE, other specialists that don't have a large group to meet with, and so they're offering kind of Anna and her counterparts in the area are developing PD together and have those people have availability of that. So yes, Tuesday the 8th would probably make more sense, but a Tuesday in the middle of the week was when we've polled and surveyed that didn't poll well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, I'm just even looking at, I understand about that time of the year, but what if it was the 21st instead of the 7th?
Could be, yeah.
Just to take it away from, because I just keep going back to, like, we've heard you say that this was a problem before, but I feel like we're right back in it now. And I understand liking a 4-day weekend, but it's a PD day. Like, we're paying for this. It needs to be well used, right?
Just going to ask a question. So if people are taking, if there's a staff member that's going to take the day off, don't they have to get that approved?
They do. There's a limit to what we can say no to.
So, Narissa, you're proposing moving it off of the Friday for the purpose of not having it on a Friday. I would suggest not moving it to the 21st because it still is a Friday. And if you're thinking that we should move it, then maybe move it to the 11th on a Tuesday.
I'm guessing it's going to be the same issue. So what I have heard was, right, Fridays aren't ideal, but the Fridays before a long weekend are really not ideal. So I was just suggesting, like, if you like it on a Friday, let's just move it to a Friday where the following Monday is not a day off.
So, and then Brian's statement on how to minimize the impact on families, having it coupled up with that other day off eliminates 2 weeks in a row where they have to find somebody, because not everybody's going to have the 10th off. And if we move it to the 21st, it's 2 weeks in a row that they're looking for childcare.
So it could be the 20. I mean, I'm not attached to a date. I was just suggesting that it get moved away from the date that it's currently set at. Could move earlier and be the 30th, or it could be another day of the week.
Can I just mention something that popped into my head that we just approved the French exchange, and the French students come in October, and I just went back and looked, they come that week, and they are very involved in the school, so it's hard, like, usually we don't have a day off at the end of October, so they get the full experience, and they have field trips, and
So it would be the week of the 28th, not where it is now. You're saying if we moved it late in the month.
No, I mean, the suggestion of October
Right.
21st. I'm just
October,
saying
right.
that, it could impact what's being done with French students. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, in this, the solution for the 7th was a lot of discussion about tying it to a holiday weekend because that's easier for families. That doesn't mean it couldn't be the 11th. I don't know, Anna, if you have an opinion on Tuesday the 11th. mean, from a, starting the week, we're fresher, right, beginning of the week rather than the end of the week.
I think in terms of, like, if we're asking staff to do the sort of the hard work of professional development and learning, we want them as fresh as possible. I think I like the idea of earlier.
Earlier in the week.
Earlier in the week than Fridays. I think Fridays, it's exhausting. People have been teaching all week long, and we're asking them to be at their best at this time when I would think earlier in the week would be better if we can do it.
I'll let you think on that for a minute while I ask you the same question about the mental health day and why that day was chosen, please.
So I have no issue with putting it earlier in the week. I mean, ultimately, you make the decision, and it's, if you're good with prioritizing the most effective use for teachers, then we could put it on the 3rd, right? It doesn't have to be tied to the holiday weekend. If we want to tie it to a holiday, but also move it earlier in the week, then I think the 11th actually works better than the 7th. I was talking about the October.
He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave that first
No,
conversation.
you said, let me think on that. So I was
Yeah,
answering that
yeah.
one, then we'll go to the 20th.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say about the October. And then the 20th, it was, again, doing it up against a weekend. And it was trying to do it in the middle of the month, right? So there's some time, a break, sometime. Could be Friday the 17th just as easily. That's a half day already for, that's parent.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking at, is that if you're talking about giving both students and staff a good solid break, you have half of your students roughly in the district in the elementary schools, and they're already getting 2 half days on Thursday and Friday. And then you're saying, take your mental health day on Monday. I don't think that's, if we're gonna take an extra day out of the calendar for a mental health day, I worry that that's not gonna give us an impact because they've already had 2 half days. And while it would be impactful for middle school and high school and, staff members, I feel like if we're going to add this day to the calendar, then it has to be as impactful for the entire community as it can be.
I don't disagree.
So I'm not sold on the placement of that either.
When's the last day? It's April 1st April 1st is the sort of the cutoff for days we have to make up for snow. Like there's the 5-day cutoff that happens in there in terms of whether we have to make them up or whether we can say we're just going.
So as of April 1st, you only make up, between April 1st and June 1st, you only make up, you don't have to make up anything over 5, right? You just have to make up the first 5.
So one of the things that you said when you presented this calendar originally was that if we end up having 17 blizzards, then we can cancel that mental health day. Given that sort of April 1st timeframe where if we've already had 17 blizzards, we have to make up all of those days, but anything afterwards, it doesn't matter anymore. March 31st is a Friday. It would make a 3-day weekend a little bit later in the month, and there's still 2 weeks before the vacation. I don't know if that would be more impactful. And then it also has the most flexibility in terms of the weather and changing the calendar if we decide to remove it or not.
Yeah, I've had a discussion with a few people about that. The only thing I would want to be cautious about is setting a calendar with the assumption that it could easily change, right? If we end up with a 17 blizzard year, right, if we're talking about February breaks and Saturdays, a couple of years ago, then that's an easy day to give up, but I wouldn't want to make it a day that we're easily going to commit to giving up. So the 31st, any time in March. It doesn't have to be March, right? We were kind of targeting that month as the long month. 31st feels like a long way to go. It could be the end of that week. It could be the 24th. Wide open for thoughts and suggestions.
I was just going to say that from the high school standpoint, I like the date where it is, only because March is a long month for the high school students, and just to have some, it's kind of right in the middle of February break and April break, and I think it, you know, they would be welcomed at the high school and to have it, you know, halfway through those two breaks.
So just, what if you made it the 17th?
What about moving the half-days to the 15th and the 16th and having it on the 17th?
I think you lose that entire week.
Can I just throw out like the
So the 17th is a
childcare
half
issue?
day for conferences.
Right, so I was saying, what if you made it a half day? Because this is the optional conferences, it's only
Yeah.
families that want to have one. It's not trying to book it every single student in for a conference like it is in December. So I'm wondering if you could do that all on the 16th and have the 17th be your mental health day, so that elementary is having half day, full day, and then full day off, and then middle school, high school would be doing 4 full days and a day off.
I do want to throw out childcare issues, because even though those are optional, you still have a child coming home at 11:40 or off for, with your way, off for a full day and then off for another full day. And although we give this calendar early enough in the year, that's like a huge situation, especially when you're talking elementary, because 90% of those kids cannot go home alone. So we're already throwing in a day off in a month that most parents don't think twice about. And then the half, like, I'm just, you know, it's a problem.
So are you suggesting one of the two things Narissa or Erin just said is a solution to that? Or?
Oh, no, I would keep, I think it's just, we have to be mindful where it goes, because now if you look at 16, 17, 20, you're looking for childcare Thursday, Friday, Monday. So half day, and then a full day off on Monday. So even though those conferences are optional, it just, so if you do 2 full days off, that's still right that close. Most parents cannot take, or caregivers cannot take off that many days in one section of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know that I have enough experience to answer whether or not one half day is enough for March conferences. Yeah. I'd
Mine
wanna-
were booked up before I could even sign on.
The spring ones?
Like the March ones, I went to sign on, and
Yeah.
I was 5 minutes after that email, and it was all the way down at the end.
Yeah, if I was to guess, if I was to try and speak for the principals, I think they would say one day is not enough. One half day.
Right now, it's 1 day virtual, 1 day in person.
Mhm.
So you have parents kind of like, now that it's optional, but they don't have to take the day, they're jumping on a chance to clean up any like lingering issues. So it's been great, but I don't think they're going to be able to fit everybody in one.
I hate to say this, but the mental health day was kind of a last-minute addition to this calendar. I wonder if it just makes sense, given that there seems to be a lot more thought needed on where it's useful in the calendar, to just say, this is what we're going to do next year, and we're going to find the right placement for it well in advance and kind of ask all those questions that we need to ask, because I just feel like I don't want to push approving a calendar, right? But I feel like this is not a place where we're ready to make that decision on a calendar for this coming year.
So what are you suggesting, we don't put the day in?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion. Rather than put the day in a really bad spot, that's going to put people in a rough place, because we've heard that, right? A bunch of the placements so far have been places that are going to put people in tough spots. So rather than make a bad decision, I would suggest maybe making no decision this year and saying this was a last-minute addition to the calendar. You know, I don't love losing it for middle school and high school students, but I don't want to put it in a bad spot. So let's say we want to have this in the calendar next year, and then we can have that conversation with school councils, that TRTA could have that, right? Let's find the right spot for that, where it really makes an impact for all the students and all the staff as much as possible, rather than kind of being hit or miss for some populations and potentially bad for families.
So before we go that, can we also consider, is there a reason why we do 2 half-days instead of a full day of conference? Because we could fix this by doing a full day of conference and then a full mental health day.
You would lose 1 day of school, so a half day of school counts as 180, one of the 180.
Okay.
So you'd be adding, we could do that, and you would add 1 day, so it would be the 16th and 26th would be the last days of school.
Gotcha. Not ideal.
I guess I would just say, I think there's been so much polls and discussion, and it's so split. I don't know that we'll find an any more perfect place. We could poll families, and there's lots of things we could do, but I think we'll still end up with, going to have to try it to figure out the perfect day.
And one of the things that I've learned from educational research is that any intervention has an effect. It doesn't matter whether the intervention is a great one or a mediocre one. It has an effect, and so you are always comparing research to, is this better than just the baseline intervention effect? And I feel like if we're going to add a mental health day, if it's not ideal, it's still going to have a positive effect. It sounds like that attached to those 2 half days is not a good idea, but there's certainly a long stretch in between February and April, and attaching it to another weekend, I mean, I throw out March 31st, but also earlier in March 10th or something, or I don't know. But
I'm not opposed to it. I just, to be mindful, just, that's a lot of, there's not a lot of parents that can just take a half day. So they're already taking off a full day or rearranging and moving it, and then you remove a Monday. I think we can all attest to the fact that once you've messed with your schedule and then Monday's off, your emails are already full.
Anybody have anything else? Go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, I favor what Narissa was saying about the half-day in October. I think it should be pushed to the 3rd, which is a Monday at the beginning of the week. I think that to back it up to a holiday weekend is just a recipe for not a lot of professional development.
So to confirm, you're talking about the full day, the 7th, the PD day?
Right. Pushing it to the 3rd.
My thought on this is looking at starting, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Looking at starting before Labor Day, I think is a great idea because you have teachers in on the 29th, the 30th, and then start school on the 31st. Then they can get all the things worked out that need to be worked out, schedules, lockers, and then starting back after Labor Day. Having a weekend off, I think, is a great idea to start before Labor Day. For the 10th, the full day off. I'm not opposed to either way, whether you keep it there or move it, but it does make sense to move it so that you have more professional development people that show up for that day. And for the 10th, that maybe it could be moved to the 14th or so that it's not, or to a different Monday so that it's not attached to a long weekend. And in regards to the March 20th date, I think we're giving parents a year to understand what the schedule is of when this goes out. I agree it might not be a good location to be attached to the 16th and 17th, but I think, as Paul said, I think the families are going to look at that as they might not like starting before Labor Day, but once March comes and they say, oh, we got the day off, I think they're going to have a positive attitude. If you move it to a different Monday, maybe it would be better, or a different Friday. But I'm for the way you have the schedule, but maybe the days have to change a little.
So you're all voting the calendar, not me. So I guess I would say I hear you on all the various points raised. I mean, we can certainly come back with another calendar next month. I think we need to do it tonight, because I think for families, and I think we're supposed to have it set by the 15th by the teacher's contract to notify them. So yes, we should vote it tonight. So what I'm hearing people say is, like the start before Labor Day, good with everything, keep 22nd of December half-day, 23rd is off. Last day is the 15th and the 23rd. Concerns about the October PD day and the March Mental Health Day. Is that a fair summary of what we're saying? So I've heard a bunch of different things. We talked about if we wanted to keep it around Columbus Day, we could move it, if we talk about October 1st, October Day 1st, sequentially. We moved it to the 11th. That gets it earlier in the week, but still abuts it against the Columbus Day holiday, which I'm hearing is not, people don't love that. Okay. So then the other option to keep it, I think when we talked about timing-wise, early October made sense, right? Pushing it into September was too early. Late October wasn't ideal.
I don't think we can do PD in
We cannot do,
September
you're right, yes. So, I mean, to keep it early, we could go, and to keep it on either end of the week, we could move it to the 3rd of October from a programming-wise, that would work. So we could talk about the 3rd or the 11th. It sounds like more people want to keep it away from the Columbus Day weekend, which would mean Monday the 3rd would be the PD day. And then for March, I have no clue what you all think. No, I have every clue what all of you think. I'm not sure if there's any, I'm trying to synthesize it. Concern about keeping it up against the 16th and 17th, the half days. We definitely need 2 half days. We could, someone mentioned, I remember who said we could do half days the 15th and 16th, and then the full day on the 17th. I personally like it in the middle of the month, because I feel like that was the genesis of the discussion was, it's a long month. People need a break in the middle. I know the athletic season starts, I think the spring season starts the 20th next year. So the 17th, as I'm saying it out loud, actually probably works better, because coaches might need to be in there on the 20th. Or if we wanted to still do it, but not up against the conferences specifically, we could do the 13th, so we just move it 1 week earlier. So we get that all over with in 1 week, mess up 1 week, or create a little more separation. I'm trying to summarize, and I'm having a hard time summarizing, because y'all got a lot of different opinions.
Sorry. The 27th of March, it moves it a week later, but it means that there'd be 20 school days before that and 14 school days after it, in between the 2 vacations. It's fairly central. It's disconnected from the week, creates a 3-day week.
Something to look forward to.
Right, it's something to look forward to. It is towards the end of March, but you've only, the February vacation is late, so it's only 4 weeks before that day. And for the elementary schools, you have the 2 half days, which is a break for the kids, which is, nice. And connected to that, I've only really been receiving the Kids Club emails for 7 months, but on those half days, is there a possibility of finding some people who aren't doing as many conferences to sort of float into Kids Club and actively advertise that we have extra room those 2 days by using some people creatively, and we have extra room, it's a small fee for half-day Kids Club or something. Just to alleviate the half-day concern that Caitlin's bringing up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's other options, Boys and Girls Club in Salisbury, and then I think, can we? Yes. Are we confident we'll have people? I would say we have a severe lack of confidence in finding people. Is that a fair? Everyone's nodding, yes. Love the idea, and absolutely, if we can staff it, we certainly, absolutely, and we do. I mean, on half days, it's pretty routine, right? Yeah, on half days, we run the program. Yeah. You're going to say something? Just to tell me when I'm wrong. That's the only thing she's going to put her microphone on for.
Can I ask one more, why does it have to be these days questions? Is there any reason why the half-day parent-teacher conference days have to be the 16th and 17th? Could we move those up a week?
Mhm.
And then leave the 20th mental health day where it is?
It would be marking periods, so we'll come back to that. It has to do with marking periods, right? Conferences are after the report cards are put out.
In theory.
That's a statement of fact. Generally, yes, report cards are put out before conferences. There might be a debate about whether you think that's the best way to do it.
No, there may have been times where I don't have a report card in my hand when I walk into parent-teacher conferences, or I'm literally getting it Thursday as I'm walking into my parent-teacher conference half an hour later.
SCS parents get it when they sit down, so you don't have it beforehand.
There you go.
You walk in
So,
opening it.
just
So-
saying,
We have to look at that. So if the marking period closes a week earlier, then that changes everything on the academic calendar. So,
Can
Yeah.
I just make a comment about pushing it later for the high school level? As Brian said, high school sports will start. I don't know the exact date, but if we're the only school that's not open, that screws up the high school sports for the spring sport kids. So, it's just something to consider when we're talking about pushing it later. I worry that if we go much beyond the 20th, that it's going to mess up high school sports and other high school activities.
We're also up against the MCAS window if it were later in that last week in March.
there were lots of reasons why it landed here. It wasn't just Brian like spitballing throwing it. Well, I cut you off, Erin.
I was just going to say it looks good the way it is, but like I said, I'm in the minority.
Wait, I didn't hear what you said.
It looks good the way it is,
Oh.
but I'm in the minority.
I agree with Erin, and I agree with what Linda said earlier, that, we're doing this so far out. I personally like this as it is, although I do think that October 7th date for PD, as Narissa talked about, we talked about quite often how that was not the most productive day for PD. So if that got moved to maybe the 3rd of October, that would be fine with me. I like the March thing the way it is. I think it works.
So do you have a different date for the October one,
Do I have a different date?
so that we can vote it tonight?
The 3rd.
The th-
He said the 3rd.
Oh, you said the 3rd. Oh,
That's what I wrote down.
so you would
Fresh in
change the
11th.
October 10th date to
Oh, the October. I'm sorry, I'm looking at March.
10th is.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is early in the week, but not up against Columbus Day,
Yes.
which is the 3rd, yes, is the best choice based on what I'm hearing everyone talk about.
So if we move that to the 3rd and leave the 20th where it is, does anyone have an issue with that, other than Narissa?
yes.
So when I travel for work, the easiest thing to do is either do a long weekend off or in the same week. You know what I mean? So like if it's coupled with the 11th, so that you know that you have Monday and Tuesday off, you can still travel the week before and the week after if you have to. And that's why I had said before, like coupling it up against the long weekend. And I understand that we're having the discussion about not putting it there for certain purposes, but somebody, if you have to travel, trying to find childcare for 2 weeks in a row is the part that's the troublesome part.
You're speaking about for October.
I'm speaking about October. That's why, so that and the March, coupling it up against a weekend where you already are taking days off on either end of it, so that it's sandwiched with the weekend, is easier to take the time off than it is to have it 2 weeks in a row on a Monday.
I think that's true if you're a salaried worker. I'm not so sure that's true if you're an hourly worker.
But in October, he's moving it to the 3rd, so it would just be the 3rd, the Monday and the Friday. So it's not 2 weeks in a row.
What I'm saying is I would have a 5-day week to be able to travel if we had it on the 11th, and then only looking at 3 days for the rest of the week on the 11th.
Like the teachers, I don't think we're ever going to agree. So I think what we need to do is, you suggested the 3rd, so October 3rd and March 20th are the 2 days. The rest of the calendar, I believe everybody was okay with.
Yeah, like I said, the one thing I would say is if we wanted to keep it, it wouldn't be butted up against, but if we wanted to keep it in the same week, I believe there were people nodding no, or saying no when I said this, move the 20th to the 13th, and then it's messing up the week of the 13th, specifically for elementary families. Middle school, high school would have a 4-day week, the 14th through the 17th. Elementaries would have 4 days, but 2 full days on the 14th, 15th, 2 half days on the 16th, 17th, and at least confines all the messiness. And that actually uncomplicates what you were just saying, Maureen, with the high school spring season starting on the 20th.
My only concern there is just the flow of that week. I haven't taught elementary school, so I don't know that it goes the same, but if I looked at a week where it was 2 full days and 2 half days, that's very difficult to wrangle attention.
Agreed.
I just want to come back to, again, if you're sticking the 20th that close to the 16th and 17th, then the mental health day will not be impactful for half of the students in the district. And it will be more stressful for their families.
I don't have a response for that. I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm looking, going, yep, I put nope, no, said no. So,
I guess all we can do is, let's just vote on do you want to put it on the 3rd?
I feel like I'm hearing that you generally agree that the PD day, you don't want it on a Friday, or up against a long, combined with a long weekend, which then I would say the 3rd, yes, makes the most sense.
Do you want me to make a motion? The 3rd and the 20th. Go ahead.
So the only change you're making, if I'm hearing it correctly, the only change you're making is the October. Can I just ask, so the rest of the half-days are on Fridays? No one has an issue with that? I know that came out of the PD committee, right? Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve the school calendar for the 2022-2023 school year as presented with amending the October PD day from the 7th to the 3rd.
No, I think it's from the 10th to the 3rd, right?
No.
7th.
7th
10th
to
is
the
the Columbus
3rd,
Day.
and everything else stays as is.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
I dare you.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry. All those opposed? Okay. That is one that I didn't realize we were going to have that much discussion. Yes, the next item is middle school, high school statement of interest. We've been working toward a plan for work on the Byfield campus, with discussions beginning years ago and eventually leading to a facilities assessment in the last couple of years. This fall, the 3-member town select board agreed with the committee that a statement of interest should be submitted to the state school building authority this year. The superintendent will give us an update.
So doing this a little differently, we don't have an SOI for you to approve tonight. The way this process works, we're still working through the details with the MSBA. Because this is, you have in your packet 2 model votes, and yes, it needs to be read verbatim and twice. We need to do, because there are 2 distinct schools on this campus, the MSBA systems pull from DESI systems. So because we have a 4-digit code for the middle school and a 4-digit code for the high school, the MSBA sees them as 2 separate entities, even though they share the same 286,000 square foot campus. So I was shocked that the MSBA hasn't figured this out, because there has to be others, but they have a process for consolidating campuses, but they don't have a good process for campuses that are already consolidated that are looking to be renovated. So what they've asked us to do is submit 2 SOIs, identify the high school as the priority, then say, yes, we want to consolidate. In the note that pops up, it's a whole online system. So when I say yes, consolidation, a little box pops up. Explain, already consolidated, already, a project was done in late 90s through the SBAB. Put that detail and say, yes, this is the priority SOI. Answer all the questions, provide all the information on the rest of the SOI. File a duplicate SOI for the middle school. Say, I want to consolidate, put the same note. It's not the priority SOI. In most places throughout the document system, it will spit out and it'll say see high school SOI, see high school SOI. So from my understanding and talking with Diane Sullivan, it's literally they have to check the box, because when they're audited after they disperse, when they disperse the funds to us, because it's going to happen, they have to make sure that they can check all the pieces of the puzzle and parts in the checklist. And the first one is, did the committee vote to submit an SOI for this facility? So it is, we'll work through all the mechanics of that. This vote allows us to submit the vote. It says March of 2022. So this allows us to finish it up and get it submitted by midnight on March 31st. We're working with Mike Perillo from Perillo Designs. There's a lot of technical information we're gathering. Thankfully, we did that comprehensive facilities assessment. So a lot of that we can see the facilities assessment. There's a lot of detail there. But Mike's done a great job working with, meeting with students and with faculty to write the story of why the building needs to be brought up to the 21st century. So certainly we'll provide you a copy when it's ready. This vote tonight allows us to get it done and in by the end of March. If we're not able to do that, I would either A, ask you to schedule another meeting, but I probably wouldn't. I would most likely just say, we'll take it up at the April meeting, and by that point, we would likely have it prepared for you, ready to go. So all of the boxes that need to be checked in this process are very rigid. Those who were involved in the Pine Grove project, timelines and verbiage. Both of these motions have been approved by their MSBA legal counsel, so they've said, yes, this meets the needs. The 2 priorities that are identified are listed in the motion. There are other priority areas. We started down the path of priority 3 is in danger of losing our accreditation. And so I have the NEASC accreditation report in draft form. It's not public yet. Yes, it says we need a new building. Yes, it says a lot of things about the needs, but it doesn't say we're in danger of accreditation. So rather than trying to create something that doesn't exist, it doesn't make sense to use priority 3. So it's priority 5 and 7, which in essence is updating the building. We have a lot of work to do to bring the building up to code. We would code this as prioritize as a renovation repair. that this wouldn't be. Again, you know the process. Once we enter, we study everything. So we have to study they're going to make us look in all the 3 towns and study, is there other land available? And then ultimately, I think they'll land with, no, the most cost-effective way is to use the campus existing footprint, if not shrink the footprint. This is a very spread-out building, square footage-wise, geographically, but there's a lot of capacity to expand space upwards. So, so I can provide you a copy even when it's more ready. There's a lot of bits and pieces. The system won't allow you have to put in sections before you can save it, so it's being drafted separately in a Google document. But the structure of the SOI is a lot of boring data about the building and then telling the story about why we believe those priorities as outlined in the motion are the reasons we need to enter into an agreement with the MSBA to do a project. So, questions?
Does anybody have any questions? Can we have a motion? This is going to require 2 motions.
Yep. We'll do the middle school first. Having convened in an open meeting on March 9th prior to the SOI submission closing date, the school committee of the Triton Regional School District, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated March 2022 for the Triton Regional Middle School, located at 112 Elm Street, Byfield, Massachusetts, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs. And 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved location requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Can I have a second?
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Can I have a motion?
Ready for the second one? Okay. This is for the high school. I make a motion, having convened in an open meeting on March 9th prior to the SOI submission closing date, the school committee of the Triton Regional School District, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated March 2022 for the Triton Regional High School, located at 112 Elm Street, Byfield, Massachusetts, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs. And 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved location requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance of or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Can I have a second?
Second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Woo-hoo.
Thank you.
The next item is the central office reorganization. During the budget process this year, the superintendent described a plan to reorganize the central office staff. While this has no effect on the bottom line of the budget, it did involve shifting monies between lines. The superintendent will update the committee on continuing efforts towards this reorganization.
So I think on this agenda item, the easiest way is to have you click on the proposed organizational chart that shows you the overview. The rest of the documents I won't go through in detail. The PNN reviewed these, the job descriptions that go along with the organization that I'm going to talk about, only those that change. There are other job descriptions, like mine, that aren't changing, and so therefore aren't shown to you as a proposed change. So again, the piece that you're approving tonight would be the job descriptions themselves, not necessarily the organizational chart. So we've had some previous discussion about this. As you know, when Kimberly Croto left in the fall, don't remember exactly when, Anna Bates was in her previous role as teaching and learning coordinator. She is currently the interim assistant superintendent. As we've had lots of discussions, the four of us, I think it makes sense. I don't believe we're in a place where we need an assistant superintendent specifically. And so as we talked about the roles that the three individuals to my right play, as well as Greg Kulowick, the director of technology, we felt like a realigning of those four positions were key, and changing to a consistent title. And so where we landed was the director of, and I think the titles are actually far more helpful and descriptive. So if you look at the organizational chart, the director of curriculum instruction and assessment is currently what the majority of that is done by the current assistant superintendent. You move next to the director of student services. That is currently the role of special education administrator, but again, there's some shift between the two of those. Director of Finance and Operations would be, rather than school business administrator, not a lot of change in the description itself, other than some updated language. The structure and the position is the same. The title changes from school business administrator to Director of Finance and Operations, which I've seen more and more in districts. It's far more descriptive of the work that Kyle does. Director of Technology does not change, other than some associated language with the reports. And then building principals, obviously this is just documenting the role that they play, no change in their descriptions. The key shift in the responsibilities is between Anna and Shannon's position. And so from what was the assistant superintendent, we're shifting 504, guidance, and health services, and nursing. I knew there was one more. So those roles, putting everything that is truly a student service under the director of student services. So then what was the assistant superintendent, those student services pulled out, it remains the rest of all curriculum instruction and assessment domains under each. So the assistant superintendent role shrinks a little bit, and then the role of Director of Student Services expands a little bit. To support those roles, one of the things when we had collapsed, when the former early childhood coordinator retired, we did not replace her, and that got absorbed into Kim's position. And as we've had lots of discussions about that role, early childhood is a different state reporting agency through EEC. Kindergarten functions very much as part of the school. Preschool itself is just very different as far as the requirements, the curriculum, the overall governance of it. So it's really important that we have an early childhood coordinator designated. That's been something we've identified as a real lack, to have someone who's focused in that area. It doesn't need to be full-time. So this proposal reinstates a half-time early childhood coordinator. So that person would oversee in greater detail all of the preschool age 3 and 4 programming, and then also be heavily involved in the coordination of all the kindergarten registration and such. And again, that the kindergarten tends to function more whole, kind of collectively within the K through 12, the K through 6 elementary school. So that would be a half-time position. The description is included in the packet there for you. The other position that we're putting back in place is a full-time special programs coordinator. We have some folks doing some of these roles, and if you look at the description, it's all before and after school programming, whether it's Kids Club or Explorations, or we received the 21st Century Grant or other grants, as well as being the full-time homeless McKinney-Vento homeless liaison and McKinney-Vento coordinator. So we've got various folks working in those areas now, mostly on an hourly rate. So this synthesizes all of those roles back into one position. You all remember Carla Collins. Carla was the special programs coordinator. Again, when she retired, kind of sent the responsibilities elsewhere, and now we know, yep, needs to be back in one consolidated position. That position is funded by various Kids Club, revolvings, explorations, McKinney-Vento, so that is a cost-neutral shift. It's just bringing it into a single 190-day position full-time, so 190-day is not year-round. So those are the two additions under Director of Curriculum and Assessment. I should say restorations, not really additions. Under the Director of Student Services, we'd be adding a full-time special education coordinator, also proposed as a 190-day position. This is something that has been proposed, was proposed by Alan Bloom going on 3-4 years ago now, prior to any even restructuring or any change in personnel. This allows, this person would partner with Shannon, with Shannon's role expanding to take on 504 and all the other student services, to more specifically focus primarily if you look at the description, really focusing on all out-of-district programming and developing and expanding in-district programming. So that is certainly, they'll have their hand in other special education components, and this doesn't mean that Shannon gets to pass all special education onto the coordinator. This is a pretty traditional structure in other schools where there's a dedicated person that is able to build the relationships with the students and families in the schools where the students are out of district. So it's not, once a student goes out, we assume they're out forever, that we keep that relationship and hopefully can someday bring them back. Likewise, Shannon's been doing work this year to create descriptions for our in-district programmings, entrance and exit criteria, and sort of more to hone in more specifically on those. This is when I will say that as we've had discussions, the four of us, Greg, and the principals, is to really make sure we have a clear path for anything related to special education. When is it that you talk to Shannon? When is it that you would talk to the special education coordinator? So the description outlines that, and obviously once the person is identified and hired, then that would be more work that we would do, and Shannon would do working with that individual to set that up. So that position as a 190-day and the halftime early childhood coordinator are roughly funded, what I said, budget neutral. Anna was previously year-round, so these non-year-round 190-day, 1.5 positions are outside of I forget where we were, like 15,000-ish that we would take out of contingency. That's a cost-neutral shift. Again, we did have I have to go back, we had a special ed coordinator, it was Carolyn Wilson, and we're probably talking early 2000s, the last time we had a special ed coordinator. So that all of these are restored positions, but some of them we haven't had in a very long time. But I think it puts the priorities and the focus where it needs to be, and it puts additional support in place where it needs to be. As far as the shift with bringing 504 on Director of Student Services, Shannon and I were just talking about a case today where they're very intricately related, right? We all know special education is special education. 504 is a regular education accommodation under Section 504 Civil Rights. But because they're so intricately involved, it's actually the best structure is to have both of those programs, if you will, under one individual. So that's the kind of the overall structure. The rest of on the organizational chart, the rest of the positions exist. The other tweak is if you look under Director of Technology, you heard Greg say a few times over the course of the budget season that we outsourced our network management. We've had a couple things go wrong, and that paid in spades, having someone here 24/7. So what we did is, rather than having a network administrator and technicians, we have, you'll see here, and then you can see in the job descriptions, a level 1 technician and a level 2. So the level 2 are the higher level technicians working more on the larger systems. They're the two running around working on when the surveillance cameras or overall network issues. They're the boots on the ground here in the district for a largely remote network management. And then the level 1 technicians are the two that are dealing with Chromebooks, monitors, PCs, hard drives going, swapping, maintenance and such. So other than that, those are the large, let me just make sure there wasn't any change other than kind of documenting the school-based leadership. But in the overall organizational chart, I personally like the structure of having the 4 central office, the 4 district directors and building principals, kind of equally across the board. Yes, all of them report to me, but working as a team, and even the arrows in between, back and forth, that there's not a top-down relationship there. It's a team working together and supporting one another, and in and out of offices, in and out of buildings, in and out of phones, in and out of emails. And I will say, I won't say I'll say we, you all have all the right people on the bus right now in those positions. So it's, you got a rock star team going here right now. So any questions on that? That's a technical description. Yeah.
And very humble.
I wasn't talking about me. I was talking about the gray boxes, and all the gray boxes to my right.
And the navy blue.
I didn't say anything about navy blue.
Can we have a motion?
Linda, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
So, Brian, I may have asked you this in PNN, and I apologize if I forget your response, but in your absence, who is going to run the school district?
So good question. So no one likes it when I talk about this. So, right, the proverbial, we have if I get hit by a bus, things will function, right? I mean, you've got the right people leading the domains. Yes, if I really got hit by a bus, you would have to make a determination and name someone, and I would trust any of the 3 sitting to my right would be capable. But rather than having one person, having each of them responsible for the 3 domains, right? The operations, the curriculum instruction, and all the student services, it would continue to function. So I don't personally believe there needs to be a person. If you feel the need, I can identify someone, and we'll document that. Yeah.
I don't know, I just think.
They're all touching their nose, they're like, not it.
Yeah, no, I just think it would be helpful, Brian, only because, you know, if something critical happened after your unavailability, I think, you know, we need to be decisive, and I think it would be helpful for somebody, so. And preferably somebody that's licensed as a superintendent, like I think Anna is.
Because you need
Just
somebody
saying.
to call school.
And Kyle, it's no slight on you or Shannon, I just think, you know, if somebody's got the license, it sure helps things.
We have a lot of policies that are superintendent or his designee.
What did he say?
Okay.
There's a lot of
policies.
where it's superintendent or superintendent's designee. You can't actively designate someone. There should be someone ahead of time that you.
Okay. I will document that. I will let you know.
Are you going to do rock, paper, scissors?
You know what's going to be awesome? I'm just going to say, oh, y'all decide and let me know. I won't do it, I promise.
Before we vote, I just wanted to say that I like this structure. You know, I think it's solid. It makes a lot of sense. I like the way that it's transitioned some of those responsibilities, because I think, you know, when I look at things like English language learners, I think they make a lot more sense, you know, in the student services bracket than they do under, you know, curriculum and instruction. So I think there are a lot of common sense moves here. And I appreciate your willingness to reconsider this, because I think it's easy to stay with the status quo and not constantly rethink how can we be better. And to my mind, this is a situation where it could easily have stayed the way it was, right? And you could have just said, we're just filling positions in the titles and the responsibilities as they exist today, and you didn't do that. You sat down and rethought it out, and it was hard, and it was a process. Obviously, it's been going on for months. So I just wanted to give you kudos for doing that, because I think that's, you know, that's something that wasn't required, right? But you saw the opportunity to make an improvement and took it. You want a motion now? Mm-hmm. I'll make a motion to approve the job descriptions as recommended by the Personnel and Negotiations Subcommittee as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is the draft letter to the Commissioner, Paul Goldner.
So we have, for the last couple of months, been working on a letter that was originally conceived of as the commissioner. However, in the last 5 minutes or so of our last meeting, the question was raised, could it instead be to the governor's office? Because if you read through that letter, there's sort of a narrative of why it's being sent, which is broadly that we started off in 2020 with a sense of unity in the community, and over the 2-year period, that sort of unity and pulling together broke down, and particularly, society-wide, those problems existed, but in particular in relation to schools, how and what we were doing became particularly contentious, and much of that can be traced to the way in which, in Massachusetts, a lot of decisions were left to people who were not in roles where they should have been making those decisions, and without really proper decision-making trees given to us, it was entirely feasible that the decisions that we had to make over the last 2 years, we could have made, but been, had choices left to us. But these are the things we want you looking at, and those be given to us in a timely fashion. And the communication from the Department of Education to us, as we discussed numerous times, was late, was contradictory with other agencies, with other boards, was not complete. But that decision-making process by the board, that communication process by the board, ultimately, if that's going to change, would that have to be something that would be directed by the governor's office directly rather than, so we had that sort of late shift, maybe this should be going to the governor. So I guess we have some questions for the committee. This is several pages, and the first question is really, is what we're doing here something that the committee approves of in this sort of format? And the second question is, if we are to send something like this, should we be sending it to the Board of Education, or should we be sending it to the governor's office? Because I think how that is worded, what we're doing with it matters to how we write some of it. And then that's sort of a broad question. One, should we be doing this? Question two is, where should it be going? And then I think question three was, if we do go through this and send this letter, we sort of arrived at this place where we would send this independently, but also send it out to the MASC listserv and say, we're doing this. We invite other districts to do it, but not to ask for co-signers, because asking for co-signers then, okay, you agree with 90% of what we say, but you're not going to sign on because of this 10% or something like that. And we also, if there's particular things in here that the committee disapproves of, doesn't want to send out, then we're planning on meeting again at the end of March to continue to work on this, taking feedback from the committee. So, did I miss anything that needs to be said? Okay.
Yeah, just the one that you said, should we send it to the governor or the board?
Oh, it's a commissioner.
Okay, I will start, and I appreciate the P&A drafting this letter. Writing resumes, they always tell you to make it as short as possible. I think having it as long as you have it, I don't think they're going to read through it. They're going to say, psst. So I think what you have here probably needs to be condensed down. During the pandemic, no matter who you had around the table, teachers, parents, students, there was never an agreement. I think even us here as a board, we all did what we thought was in the best interest of the students. I agree with you that Department Ed came at the 12th hour every single time that they made a decision. But again, I think that they were thinking that they were probably doing what was in the best interest of the students as well. And if we had drafted this letter and sent it out, I think every single one of us would have said yes, if it was 2020 or 2021. But I think we should still probably send something saying how we disagree with how things were rolled out. One of these statements that you had arrived at was putting the decision-making into the hands of us, and it should be somebody else. If we had done that, we would have been hybrid or unmasked sooner or whatever it was. So sometimes it was good that the decision was in our hands to make the decision for our district. So I wouldn't want to put it in the Department of Ed's hands at any time because they come at the 12th hour. I appreciate all the hard work that you guys put into this. But at this stage of the game, this comes off as being mad and angry, opposed to trying to give them something that if this ever happens again, you guys should be looking at. This is how you should try and help us as a district. This is criticizing every decision they made, and like us, they were trying to do what was best. No matter whether we voted remote or hybrid, each one of us cared about the kids. So that's just my opinion on this. Anybody else have any?
So I think that the goal here is the right one, to send a message. I would like to see if MASC is interested in generating a letter, not necessarily this letter, but a letter that everyone would sign on to. Because I think that a letter coming from MASC is going to have a lot more weight than just one letter from a district. Is one issue I wanted to raise. The second thing is it prudent to wait until Governor Baker gets out of the office? Okay, he's obviously not going to run and wait for a successor to send it then. But I would like to see the letter shortened and put out to MASC to see if there's some support for it. But I think the goal is there. I mean, from a leadership standpoint, they dropped the ball on a number of fronts. And, not to criticize each and every decision, but we need better leadership. That's all it comes down to.
So I'll go back to just when you guys were bringing this up, my kind of two things were keep it positive and make it constructive, right? Things that can happen moving forward that are really going to make improvements. And I think, when we were talking to the legislators, we clearly identified some issues, right? And in some cases, there were thoughts about like how to resolve those issues. I would just, again, I mean, I think part of it goes to Linda. Like, I hate looking backward because there's no fixing the past. And I feel like we need to look forward. And then, I think the other part of it is again, just that tone to it. I think anytime you come at someone with anger, like, it's really hard to get a good response from them. So you need to come in with I think a mentality of, we got to work together to make a better future sort of deal. And I think everybody has said length. So I would say that as well. I do wonder, I think you raised a good point that I kind of hadn't really considered to a full extent about who it was to. I think, commissioners tend to outlast their governors in a lot of cases. I mean, Mitchell Chester was 13 years, something like that. Am I right in thinking that? Like, he was like 3 governors, I think. No? Okay. I think he was yeah. right? They're not in and out. The governor, obviously, is going to be in and out. The Secretary of Education is generally reappointed, so I think, you consider that that person's going to go with the governor. And I think I want to say it's 5 members of the Board of Ed are appointed directly by the governor, so I think we can make a safe assumption that there's going to be a fair amount of turnover there as well with the new governor. I think that leaves you in a tough position, because while I see where you are going with sending it to the governor in kind of trying to bring it higher or above, I'm just not sure. Like, it's a rough spot, right? In other situations, that's a great thought. The timing right now, I think, that makes that really tough. I'm not sure you have an option other than to go to the commissioner, or the commissioner, and knowing that some of the board is going to outlast the commissioner, right? There are other members that are not appointed by the governor who will likely last for an extended period of time. So I don't think the Board of Ed is a bad group to have included in there, and I know certain of their members have always often posted on social media with board meetings upcoming and said, send us in your feedback. So they're receptive. Some of them are looking for it, and many of them I know have mentioned feedback that they've received in meetings. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have it go to board members as well, just because some of them are going to outlast, kind of the current structure and still be in there in times to come when we need them to address things like educator shortages and mental health professionals in schools, and the shortages that are there, and, a lot of those things that we talked about with the legislators, I guess I should say.
Okay, thank you. Back in a month.
The next letter is the draft letter to the Boards of Health. You'll recall that at our special meeting on February 16th regarding the mask policy, there was discussion on approaching our town boards of health regarding test to return. This was suggested by the nurses in the data review group. Currently, students who test positive isolate at home for days 1 through 5 and allowed to return with strict masking on days 6 through 10. Student health status is generally not shared with staff, which was previously fine because everyone was masking and there did not need to be any separate monitoring for those students on days 6 through 10. Now that masking is optional, the staff will not be able to monitor student masking on days 6 through 10, and the nurses suggested test to return as a measure to minimize students who are very recently positive and potentially still contagious being maskless. As discussed previously, absences due to cases in the schools disrupt the educational process. It is in the best interest of students and staff to minimize those disruptions. Among others, Newburyport Public Schools and the Newburyport Board of Health have implemented test to return, which requires a negative rapid test at school on day 6 or any day after that up to 10 to come back. For those who do not wish to test or who continue to test positive, they can return to school after day 10. Brian had requested consideration of this through the health agents and received word back that they believed this was beyond DESE policy. While this is true, local health boards can require stricter measures, and I would like your backing to publicly request that our town health boards consider this measure. A copy of the letter I would like to send was included in the packet, and I would welcome your feedback.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
I've already read the whole thing, so.
I know you have. But I'm just going to say, because it's in policy, it's 9 o'clock. We need to decide whether we want to continue or not. The meeting. We wanted to leave this in policy, right? If it's 9 o'clock and we have to stop and decide if we want to continue the meeting. And I finally remembered at 9 o'clock. I finally remembered. I was so proud of myself looking at I know. This is how it works, right? We stop. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's never been stopped in the 2 years
I know.
sat here.
I know.
It has never stopped, but I appreciate that.
That is something in
It
the
was when we first
policy
started.
that needs to be looked at to be removed.
That started when
Is everybody okay to continue? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any feedback on the letter?
Keeping us on track here.
And the letter was because in open, like when we spoke at that meeting, we said that we would address the test of return to our boards of health. Yes.
So mine's more of a question. I'm assuming that when we say test to return, it's not a test done by the school, but it would be either one of those kits that we send home, or they have to go to a facility or pay for a kit.
It could be whatever, it's part of the discussion. I know in neighboring communities, they trust you to do the test at home and report if it's positive. There are other communities that have talked about wanting the student to come in and test or provide the test, a picture of the test.
Thinking more on the lines of who's purchasing the test. Like, are we telling them to go seek out a test kit themselves, or are we going to provide them with a test?
I would never propose that. If we're going to do this, I would propose we have the tests for the at-home tests, and we have plenty of supply through the nurses for, symptomatic testing with the Binex. Or actually, some of those are iHealth as well.
I don't know, I'll just say, having looked at some of these other policies, it can be any variation on what you said. So I know, like, New Reports is sort of honor system. You do it at home yourself. Salem requires that you do, they provide some for you to use at home, and then if you have a negative test at home, you can let them know, and then when you enter the building, you have to go to the nurse's office, and they test a second rapid antigen at that point. And as long as that's also negative, then you can remain in the building.
Again, I just want to reiterate, I was thinking about the cost of the test on the family as opposed to what the results were.
Yeah, they're all the iHealth rapid tests. I think that they're all using, a lot of them have pictures on their websites and stuff, so.
Just a logistic question. So a student is out, doesn't test positive at school, is out with their 5 days, we're providing them with a test. How are we getting that to them? Is that going to be? So if we're going to provide them with a test, I mean, hopefully they're already part of the program and they've got some tests at home anyway. But if they needed one, do we have a plan for it? Like, is somebody going to have to drive it to them, or?
We would have the parent pick it up. I mean, I know the nurses have said swing on by, so we could easily figure that out.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I don't think you need a vote.
No.
I'm trying to remember if we put one in there. I think it was just we want to send it on behalf of.
Right, because it's closing the loop of what we said to parents that we were going to do. So the next item is subcommittee reports, policy and advocacy.
Our next regularly scheduled policy and advocacy meeting is April 13th at 5:30 prior to the full committee meeting. We will be scheduling one at the end of March to continue work on our draft letter. And I believe in April we will be also taking up financial policy. Is that correct? Correct. Okay.
And a handful of
MASC
harassment,
policies.
bullying, Title IX policies that MASC drafted.
Thank you, Paul. Finance, Caitlin?
Our next meeting is Thursday, March 24th, but if you'd like to discuss the final operating budget, the long-term financial planning, or the stabilization fund that we discussed this evening, Kyle is right there.
Thank you, Caitlin. And personnel negotiation, Paul Lees.
So we met on March 3rd, just dealing with the PEC, and I think we're going to talk about that in executive session. I don't believe we have a meeting scheduled, do we?
Thank you, Paul. The next item is executive session. The committee is expected to go into executive session for the purpose of planning for and conducting negotiations with union personnel, specifically the Public Employee Committee, PEC, regarding healthcare. To return to open session, can I have a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of planning for and conducting negotiations and union personnel, specifically the Public Employee Committee regarding healthcare, to return to open session.
Make a motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Can we have a roll call vote? Paulise?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Marissa?
Yes.
Maureen? And I'm a yes as well. I almost said Linda. Okay, we're back in open session, and I'm going to hand it over to Paul.
Okay, so we were just in executive session, and the topic of discussion is a memorandum of agreement that we have with the Public Employees Committee about the health insurance. And we've been negotiating with the PEC. We've put the health insurance out to bid, and we've received, a lot of information. We've seen people, representatives come in and explain the process to us and their rates and the justification for the savings that they propose. We heard from Harvard Pilgrim Health and also from Maya and Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the P&N subcommittee is making a recommendation that the full committee accept the memorandum of agreement whereby the PEC stays with Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Maya Trust. And so I would like to make a motion that the committee direct the chair of the P&N or the chair of the school committee to sign the memorandum of agreement between the Triton Regional School District and the Triton RSD Public Employee Committee dated March 9th, 2022.
I have a-
Second?
Any discussion?
Sorry.
All
Any
those in
discussion?
favor? Thank you. Now, before we adjourn, I just want to say that in my chairperson's remarks, I had thanked our staff, but I also want to thank everybody around here. When you get elected as a school committee member, the kids of the district become your kids. So every decision that we've made throughout this whole pandemic was done with that intent of making sure we were doing what was best for the students of the district. So I appreciate everything that everybody does. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Have a nice evening.